AITA. My cousin moved into our house and my parents expect me to act like her servant. It turns out my parents get money for this from her parents but they don't give it to me. I female 18 am a senior in high school, and I'm really just trying to survive this last year, keep my grades up, prep for college, and make the most of the time I have left with my friends before we all scatter across the country. That's been the plan for a while. My schedule has been packed between school, volleyball practice, college applications, trying to stay on top of AP classes, and having some kind of social life before everything changes. But a few months ago, my whole home dynamic changed completely. My cousin, who is 12 years old, moved in with us from India with her parents. We hadn't seen each other in 6 years, so it was a little exciting at first. My parents were really happy to have them around, and I was too, to an extent. The thing is, our house isn't small, but it's also not meant to comfortably fit 7 people long-term. There's my mom and dad, my younger brother who's 15, me, and now my uncle, aunt, and cousin. It got cramped very quickly. We tried to make it work. My cousin was placed in my room because it was easier, even though my room is literally the smallest one in the house. There was barely enough room for me to move around with my things in there, but we made a makeshift bed for her and tried to stay organized. For the first couple of weeks, I was totally fine sharing the space. I mean, she was still adjusting to a new country, new school, and a whole new life. I was patient with her. I helped her settle in, answered all her questions, even explained cultural things that confused her. I wanted her to feel comfortable. But the novelty wore off quickly. I couldn't get any privacy. I would come home from school exhausted, hoping to get an hour to myself before practice, but instead I'd find her sitting in the middle of the room, talking about what happened in her classes, asking for help with homework, or just wanting to talk for the sake of talking. I couldn't even stretch my legs out at my desk without bumping into something or someone. It reached a point where I literally didn't have space to walk around without stepping over piles of schoolbooks, clothes, or her school backpack. Eventually, after 2 months, her parents found jobs in another state and moved there. It made sense, they had better opportunities elsewhere. But instead of taking her with them, they let her stay behind with us so she could finish the school year here. She had already started to adjust, had made some friends, and was doing okay in school. I understood why they made that choice, and I didn't even question it at the time. I stepped up. I helped her with everything, from breaking down her assignments to writing emails to her teachers. I would ask her what topics she covered back in India, and I would compare it with the US curriculum so I could help her catch up. I'd sit with her for hours going through science notes, showing her how to use Google Docs, helping her learn what plagiarism is and how to avoid it, proofreading her papers, making flashcards, even helping her pick out outfits for school events. I moved all her clothes out of my closet and into the guest room after her parents left, even though I was still expected to do most of the cleaning and organizing. I didn't want to give my parents one more thing to stress about. But it started to become a burden. A heavy one. My parents began to expect that I would drop everything for her. If she didn't understand a math problem, they would call me. If she wanted to print something for school and didn't know how, they would knock on my door. If she was bored, I was the designated entertainment. I couldn't even start my own homework without being interrupted multiple times. What frustrated me even more was that no one expected my brother to do anything. He comes home from basketball practice, eats, does his homework, then disappears into his room to play video games or talk with his friends online. No one bats an eye. Meanwhile, I'm barely holding it together and still being told I'm not doing enough. And I don't mean to sound bitter, but there's a certain assumption that just because I'm the older girl in the house, it's my job to be nurturing and helpful and endlessly available. But I am also a student. A teenager. A person with my own life, plans, and limits. Eventually, I started distancing myself. I was burnt out from the emotional labor. I stopped going out of my way to ask her how school was. I began locking my door more often, especially when I needed to study or just sit in silence. I started putting my earbuds in so I wouldn't have to answer every, "Can you help me with this?" or "What does this mean?" or "Do you want to play Uno?" I began leaving for volleyball practice earlier and spending more time with my friends after school. I told my parents I had college applications to work on, which was true, but it also gave me an excuse to not be around all the time. And honestly, I needed that space for myself. Here's the thing that no one seems to notice: my cousin doesn't even try that hard to talk to me anymore. She stays in the guest room with the door closed, watching shows on her iPad or calling her friends and parents. She's not sitting outside my room crying for attention. She seems perfectly fine being on her own. But somehow, in my parents' eyes, I am being cold and antisocial. They pulled me aside last week and told me I was making her feel excluded. That I don't treat her kindly enough. That I used to care, and now I barely make eye contact with her. They think I'm being selfish. But I don't think they understand how exhausting it is to be the emotional anchor for someone when you're not even doing okay yourself. I never signed up to be a substitute parent. I never agreed to give up all my free time to tutor and entertain a 12-year-old. I did all of that because I wanted to help her adjust. I gave so much of my time and energy for months, and now that I'm stepping back for the sake of my own well-being, I'm being told I'm in the wrong. I'm tired of being the only one expected to carry this weight. My brother gets to live his life without being guilted for it. I miss just being able to sit in my room in peace. I miss talking to my friends without watching the clock. I miss not feeling guilty for wanting time for myself. And it's not even like I hate my cousin. I don't. I care about her. I want her to be happy and to do well in school. I just don't think that should come at the expense of my own sanity. I've done more than enough. I just want to spend the last year of high school making memories I'll actually enjoy, not hiding in my room pretending I'm busy so I won't be dragged into another hour-long session of, "Can you quiz me on these flashcards again?" I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just done playing the role of everyone's solution. Update 1. It got worse before it got better. Once my cousin fully settled into her routine and her parents were completely out of the picture, living their new lives in another state, I somehow became the replacement adult. The expectations shifted so quietly, it almost felt like I imagined them at first. But then the comments started. Not direct confrontations, just little remarks designed to make me feel guilty without actually saying anything outright. If I came home after school and went straight to my room, I would hear my mom say, "Some people forget what family means once they get busy with their own lives," loud enough for me to hear through the hallway. If I left on a Saturday to hang out with my friends or grab dinner with my teammates after practice, my dad would let out this exaggerated sigh and say something like, "Must be nice to have so much free time while others are struggling." It was never said to me. Always around me. Always just loud enough to sting. At first, I tried not to let it get to me. I told myself I deserved to spend time with friends. I reminded myself that I had already done so much. But the thing about guilt is that it doesn't just hit you once and go away. It creeps in slowly and makes you second-guess every choice. I'd be sitting at lunch with my friends and randomly remember the sound of my dad's disappointed sigh. I'd cancel plans last minute because I'd feel too guilty walking out the door while my cousin stayed home. And when I did go out, I couldn't enjoy myself fully because I felt like I was being watched even from a distance. The guilt-tripping worked, for a while. I started spending more time at home again, even when I didn't want to. I helped with assignments I didn't understand myself, like 6th grade science projects that somehow took up half the kitchen table and involved 5 different poster boards. I sat through long, winding conversations about middle school drama and tried to pretend I wasn't counting the minutes until I could escape. I tried to push through it, but every day it felt less like I was a high school senior preparing for adulthood and more like I had been demoted to some unpaid live-in tutor/nanny/therapist who just happened to also be applying to colleges. The toll it took on me started small, missed deadlines here and there, a drop from an A to a B in one of my classes, a few late nights spent doing homework I should have finished hours earlier. But soon, it wasn't just about academics. I wasn't sleeping properly. I would stay up too late to get my own schoolwork done because I had spent the entire evening helping someone else. I stopped responding to texts. I stopped going to events unless I absolutely had to. My energy just bottomed out. My mental health started unraveling in ways I didn't want to admit at first. I'd lie in bed some nights wondering if I was being selfish for wanting space. I started questioning whether my expectations for a normal teenage life were unreasonable. Was I asking for too much by wanting to be treated like a daughter and not a substitute parent? Every time I tried to assert a boundary, like saying no to helping with a book report or choosing to eat dinner alone in my room, I'd get hit with that same refrain, "You're the older one. You need to set an example." That line haunted me. It came up constantly. I couldn't express frustration without being reminded of how my cousin was younger and still adapting. I couldn't say I was tired without being told that I had to be strong for others. I couldn't cry, because crying would mean I wasn't grateful, and the last thing I wanted was to be seen as ungrateful. It was like I had been cast in a role I never auditioned for, and the moment I tried to walk off stage, I was told I was ruining the entire play. The hardest part wasn't even the pressure. It was the hypocrisy. My brother, who is just 3 years younger than me, lived in a completely different universe. He would come home, toss his backpack in the corner, eat whatever was in the fridge, do a half-hour of homework, then disappear into his room to play video games or talk with his friends. Nobody expected him to help my cousin study. No one asked him to babysit or explain science terms or read through 3 pages of a poorly written essay. If he showed his face at dinner and didn't make a mess, it was practically a celebration. He would walk out of the kitchen after rinsing a plate and my parents would say things like, "See, that's how you help out around the house," while I sat there with a headache from explaining American history to a 7th grader who could not care less about the Civil War. He didn't lift a finger beyond what he was already doing for himself, and yet he was praised for simply existing without creating problems. Meanwhile, I was drowning in expectations that no one else had to carry. And the worst part? No one even noticed that I was drowning. Meanwhile, my brother continued to be praised for doing the bare minimum, like putting his plate in the sink. Update 2. A few weeks ago, something happened that changed everything. It started off like any other exhausting evening. I was sitting at the dining table with my cousin, helping her prep for yet another history test. She was half paying attention, fiddling with her pencil, clearly uninterested in learning about the Bill of Rights, and I was trying not to snap after the 5th time she asked the same question about the First Amendment. My head was pounding, and I remember thinking, I could be doing literally anything else right now. I could be finishing my essay, scrolling through my phone, lying in bed, living my own life. But instead, I was here, again, explaining things I had already gone over multiple times. Then she said something that made my entire body freeze. She looked at me casually, totally unbothered, and asked, "How much are you getting paid for all this?" I blinked, confused. I thought I had misheard her. So I asked her what she meant. She looked at me like I was the weird one, and said, "Aren't mom and dad sending money to your parents every month to thank you? They said it was for your time since you're helping me so much." It felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. In that moment, my brain short-circuited. I couldn't form a response. I just sat there, staring at her while she shrugged and went back to her flashcards, completely unaware that she had just detonated a bomb in my head. I didn't say anything else to her. I waited until she went to bed and then sat in my room for a good 20 minutes, trying to collect myself, trying to convince myself that I had misunderstood her. That she had exaggerated. That maybe her parents offered money but my parents turned it down. That this wasn't what it sounded like. But something in my gut told me otherwise. It all clicked too perfectly. The way my parents were so insistent that I help her. The way they dismissed every complaint, every attempt to set a boundary. The way they made me feel like this was just what family did, like I was selfish for even thinking I was doing too much. And now I was learning that there was money involved. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't let it go. So I got up, marched straight to the living room where my parents were watching TV, and asked them point blank if my aunt and uncle had been sending them money. Their reaction said everything. My mom looked at me like I had just accused her of a crime. She immediately said I was being ridiculous, that I needed to stop making up stories. My dad didn't even try to deny it outright, he just told me I was being dramatic and that I should go help my cousin with her homework instead of wasting time on nonsense. But I saw it. The way they avoided eye contact. The way my mom's voice got defensive before I even finished my question. The way my dad tried to shift the focus back to my responsibilities. I knew then that it was true. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that my aunt and uncle had been sending money. And my parents had been accepting it. On my behalf. Without telling me. Without even acknowledging it. For months, I had been bending over backward, sacrificing my time, my energy, my peace of mind, to help someone adjust to a new life. I had poured myself into this role because I thought I was doing the right thing. Because I believed it was my choice. I believed I was doing something out of kindness, not obligation. I thought I was helping my family through a difficult time because it mattered. Because I cared. And all the while, my parents were pocketing money and letting me believe my efforts were just expected. They watched me struggle. They watched me fall behind in school, miss out on milestones, wear myself thin, and instead of stepping in, instead of offering support or even just gratitude, they took the credit and the compensation, and left me with the workload. It made sense now. Why they reacted so strongly whenever I tried to set boundaries. Why they made me feel guilty for needing space. Why they pushed back every time I said no, why they refused to ask my brother for help. Because to them, this wasn't just about family anymore. This was a transaction. And I was the product being sold. That realization broke something in me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. All those months of effort and stress and mental strain had been quietly converted into something transactional behind my back, and I hadn't even been granted the dignity of knowing. They didn't see me as a daughter doing her best. They saw me as a convenient solution, a resource they could use to fulfill a family obligation, keep up appearances, and collect a quiet paycheck in the process. After that night, something shifted. Not on the surface, I didn't confront them again. I didn't scream or rage or tell them how deeply it hurt. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I just went still. I stopped offering extra help. I stopped volunteering to organize my cousin's schoolwork or check her emails or print out her assignments. I stopped rearranging my schedule to accommodate her. I stopped caring whether my silence made them uncomfortable. I started choosing myself, finally. Because now I knew the truth. I wasn't just being overburdened. I was being used. Update 3. The very next day, everything changed. I woke up with this quiet, simmering resolve that I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't angry in the loud, explosive way. I was done being angry like that, it got me nowhere. I was just done. Done being manipulated, done being guilt-tripped, done being treated like my time and effort were disposable. So when my cousin came knocking on my door asking if I could help her study for her upcoming quiz, I didn't open the door. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, my mom called my name from the hallway, saying my cousin needed help. I walked out and looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'm not doing a single extra thing until I get some answers." That didn't go over well. Immediately, I was bombarded. My mom told me I was being dramatic and disrespectful. My dad told me I was lucky to have a roof over my head and food on the table and that if I wanted to act selfish, I could start paying rent. They threatened to take away my phone, my car privileges, even said they'd call up the school to reduce my extracurriculars if I was going to act too busy to help at home. It was every classic move in the parental guilt trip playbook, and I had seen them all before. But this time, it didn't shake me. I stood there and calmly said that I knew they were getting money from my aunt and uncle. That I had heard it from my cousin's own mouth. That I wasn't asking for charity, I was asking for what I had earned. I said that if they were going to turn me into a full-time caregiver/tutor and get paid behind my back, then I was going to start acting like a paid worker, too. And no paid worker does everything for free while being treated like a moody teenager who just needs to grow up and help out. They didn't admit anything right away. At first, it was just denial, layered with fake confusion and the usual, "How could you think that of us," routine. But I didn't back down. I stopped doing everything. I didn't help with homework. I didn't sit through another history review. I didn't make sure my cousin had lunch prepped or remind her when to log in for assignments. When she forgot her math book at school, I didn't jump in to fix it. When she asked me to quiz her, I said no. My parents tried to ignore it at first. Then they got frustrated. Then the silent treatment started, days of tight-lipped meals, closed doors, cold stares. My mom would make pointed comments about selfishness. My dad kept bringing up how some people in this house think they're above family responsibilities. And then, just for a cherry on top, my brother decided to chime in. He told me I was overreacting. That I was making things worse for everyone. That it wasn't that big a deal and that I should just get over it. I didn't even let him finish. I told him flat out that he had no idea what it felt like to be expected to give up every ounce of your energy for someone else while everyone around you clapped for you in silence and walked away the moment it got hard. I told him until he was the one sitting up for 3 hours explaining decimal conversions to someone who didn't want to learn them, he could sit down and stay quiet. Eventually, after the house felt like a bomb shelter for a week, my parents caved. They admitted it. Not with any real shame, of course, but with that tight-lipped, "Fine, since you're making such a big deal out of it," tone. They told me that yes, my aunt and uncle were sending some money each month to help with extra expenses. That part of it was meant to cover the additional cost of food, utilities, school supplies, things like that. But they also said it was intended as a thank you. A token of appreciation for how much I was helping. But instead of telling me, instead of giving me any agency in the matter, they had quietly accepted the money, used it, and left me out of the loop. That was the moment something in me fully snapped. Not in anger, but in certainty. I told them, calmly, clearly, that if they wanted me to keep helping, I was going to be paid. I wasn't doing this out of resentment. I wasn't saying I didn't care about my cousin. I just wasn't willing to be used anymore. If they had turned this into a job without telling me, then they were going to treat it like one. I said that if they were okay accepting money for my labor, then they could go ahead and compensate me for it, too. After some muttering and complaining and a bit more tension, we came to an agreement. Now, I get a set amount from what my aunt and uncle send each month. It's not a fortune. It's not enough to change my life or pay for college. But it's enough that I don't feel invisible. It's enough to make the time I put in feel valued. It's enough to remind me that my energy matters. I still help my cousin. I still sit with her and go over lessons. I help her write papers, review vocabulary, prepare for tests. But I do it on my terms. I schedule the sessions around my own workload. If I need a night off, I take it without guilt. If I have plans, they stay. I am no longer guilted into sacrificing my time, and if anyone tries, I remind them that this is no longer a one-sided arrangement. Interestingly, my cousin respects me more now. She doesn't whine or throw passive-aggressive comments when I say I'm not available. She doesn't barge into my room anymore. She asks before entering. She says thank you more often. She understands the boundary because I finally drew one with ink instead of pencil. And to anyone who thinks families should help each other no matter what, without expecting anything in return, I agree, to a point. But if your family is already being paid for your help, and they're keeping you in the dark while pushing all the responsibility onto your shoulders, then yeah. You deserve to get what's yours.